Hi, Virtual SQL Bits. My name's Mark Pryce-Maher, and I'm from Microsoft, and I'm here to talk to you about Azure Synapse Analytics evolving the SQL data warehouse. All right, let's get into the slides. All right, so this is the title. This is where, if we were in a real session, I'd be saying, this is the title, and then you can now leave. So there will be kind of quite a lot of people sort of walking out the room at this point as they realize they're in the wrong session. Because this is virtual, all you need to do is click away or decide that this is the right session for you, and this is going to be recorded. But as this is going out live, me one is going to be doing the presentation, and me two is going to be answering questions. So there'll be a chat window somewhere. I don't know, the guys from the team from SQL Bits are going to be sorting that out. So through the magic of technology, me too will be answering those live questions. So this is going to be a bit of a whirlwind session because there is just so much to cover, and I just can't cover everything. This is a several-day course, and so what we're trying to do is give you a flavor of what Azure Synapse Analytics is, and all kind of the parts that go into making it and the glue that puts it together. But really, I'm only going to be able to show you kind of just a slice of the service, slice of some of the services, and even those I won't be able to dig in very deep. We'll go through our one slide, that's all I've got, on the rest is demos, and we'll go through and we'll just show you what the architecture and the services and how they're built up. I'll refer to Azure Synapse Analytics as a collection of services. So some of these you actually already have now, and some of them are brand new, and so we'll highlight the brand new ones. But it is a platform, so it isn't just one thing, it's lots of things all together that become more than the sum of their parts. And it's a cloud-based analytics platform. Right. So it all starts with probably and some people won't like this, but probably one of the key bits is this data lake. It's the storage layer. This is where all, a lot of your files, a lot of your data is actually going to hit this first, and how you design this is really key. Sorry, you can't really see that bit. There we go. And we've also integrated it in with a common data model, and there will be other sessions at SQL Bits which will go into that. So we have our storage, and then the next layer is, well, how do we bring that and surface that storage up to our other services? How do we use those? How do we use that storage? And that is data integration, which essentially is a service that you already have. So you have the storage, you have blob storage, you have data lake storage, and the data integration is essentially ADF, Azure Data Factory. So they all sit together. So you've got storage, data factory. We've got two runtimes or two processing engines. That, the data integration layer is also a data processing layer, but also a file, can do all sorts of clever stuff. That includes data flows and stuff. But the SQL engine, sorry, I keep rambling. This is like the 8th time I've done these bits. Right. So we've got the SQL engine, and we've got the Spark engine. So SQL engine, the MPP SQL engine we know and love, that's what we used to call Azure SQL Data Warehouse. That came from our APS product, and previously even the Data Allegro days. And then we have this new service. This is Spark. So this isn't Databricks. It's not. So just be clear, it's not Databricks. It is a Spark 2.4 provisioned Spark service with extra libraries that we've added in, open source libraries, so not Microsoft specific libraries. So it isn't Microsoft Spark, just because people do ask that question. Now the SQL engine comes in two flavors. So it comes in the provisioned, so this is the Azure SQL Data Warehouse, or we call SQL Pool now, and then another new service which is SQL-on-Demand, which is SQL over data lake. This is, you don't pay for, you don't provision a cluster all you do is execute a SQL statement over the top of storage, and then you pay for the amount of storage that you are consuming with that SQL query. So it's a different model, and they're very different use cases. They can overlap, obviously, but we are seeing people use the SQL-on-Demand because I can just run those queries when I like. I don't need to provision a cluster and pay for it to be running. Then we've got the languages on top. So obviously SQL, Python, .NET. .NET, yes, you can run .NET in Spark. So this is nothing, this is just some open source libraries. It's Apache.NET and .NET Core, Scala. And then another new service, which is the Synapse Analytics Studio. So this is the way to get to all the services. Now you can use other tools, but this will probably be your So now we've got this open. So if we type in Synapse, we get 3 services. So we get this private link hubs preview. That's not the one we're interested in. The one we're interested in is this one, the Azure Synapse Analytics Workspaces preview. So this is a public preview we want to look at. This one here, so don't confuse it. This is the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So if I just wanted to create an MPP SQL Data Warehouse on its own, this is the one I would use. This is a GA product. This is the one that millions of people are using for their data warehouses. So this is a GA product. This is the workspace. This is preview, and this is the one we're going to look into today. All right. So I've actually had some previously from some other work. This is the one that I've been showing with customers. We might dip into that, but let's create one from scratch. I'm going to create a new resource group. I'm going to call that SQL bits. Yep. Workspace. I'm going to call this SQL bits workspace. Now the regions, this is not all our regions, obviously. This is just the regions the preview is available in. And as it's been going through the phases, more and more regions are being added. I have to have a separate storage account for it. Now, for me, I end up just creating a new one, just because it's going to save me hassle. ST for storage. And we'll call this file system. We have to create a new one. We'll just call this bits fs. All right. So this is just saying add me as a blob data contributor to this storage. So I'm now going to just put in so this is the password for the admin for SQL-on-Demand and any SQL pools I create. So I'm going to select, I got that wrong. No, did I? Yeah. Okay. I'm just debating whether I leave in that. Right. So this is just saying I can now control them, grant control to the, so for the managed identity, okay. So we can change this afterwards. We can't change this currently. So we're going to choose it's going to be in a managed network. And we're going to allow, because it's a demo, we're going to allow all IP addresses to come across. And we got some tags. So that's it. So it's really quite simple. All I need to do is give it the name of some storage or give it some new storage and give it a SQL account name and a password. And it will now just go and create that. And that takes several minutes. So here, so while it's creating that, we're just going to run through. So the SQL-on-Demand is serverless. So we don't provision any kind of cluster. This is the new service. So, and we pay for the data that we pull off disk. So we pay for the terabyte, in fact. So this sort of pay per query model is really exciting, especially if we're exploring data, because I don't have to provision a cluster, I don't have to do anything fancy, and I can just use the user interface to go in and explore that. I should have hit create. And then these are just going to go in and sort that out. All right, great. Now let's go to the workspace. All right, so this is the workspace. So this is the overview. We've got the resource group. We can look at firewall settings. This is the storage account that we created with it. SQL admin user, and this is me as the SQL Active Directory admin. This is a SQL endpoint. Even though we don't have a SQL pool yet, we effectively have the server there behind the scenes, they're ready to connect through. So we need to create one of those. We automatically get a SQL-on-Demand service. So we'll have a look at that in a second. Right. Clicking here or clicking here launches the studio, and actually the studio is where all the clever stuff looks, the UI. But what we'll do is we'll go through here, access control, this is the admin. These are our SQL pools. So we can see that we have an on-demand pool. So our workspace is free. This doesn't cost us anything just to have. So let's now create an MPP pool. So let's just create a SQL data warehouse, as we used to call it. And sometimes and in fact, what I'll do is I'll call it SQL DW. Don't tell anyone I'm calling it SQL DW. Now, for everybody who's using this, I would then suggest you put that down to 100, because what will happen is if it's at anything higher than that, when it creates it, it will start running, and then you'll start being charged this amount. So I've got another session on SQL DW and migrations tomorrow. Not tomorrow for me, but for tomorrow for you in the future, because you're watching the recorded session. Did I say I ramble? Okay, so that's my name. All right. Now I can just create a blank data warehouse, which is fine. I can also choose a backup of a SQL data warehouse, any SQL data warehouse that I have in my subscription. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a non-workspace SQL pool. So just a SQL pool that I've had and I've been using all the time. That's just saying that the performance level is different. So this is my SQL pool that I've been using, the GA product that I've been using and testing out. So this is a really nice way of taking a existing SQL pool and moving it inside a Synapse workspace. Choose next. I don't create tags because I am lazy. So people always tell me SQL data. I'm gonna talk about this because I've got you here. Right? People always tell me SQL data warehouse is expensive, and you go, well, is it that expensive that I can turn this on and off, and that's how much I'm paying, less than £1 an hour for it? You know, not really. When you scale up to many machines, and then you've got terabytes of SSDs, multiple terabytes of SSDs, you've got terabytes of RAM, yes, it does become expensive. But just for this, no. So yeah. So as I mentioned before, just be aware it will start once it's created it. It will auto start it. So if you're not prepared, and it has happened to me in the past, you create a data warehouse, the SQL pool or Azure SQL Data Warehouse, it starts, you do some work, you forget about it, you leave it running for the weekend, and then you have a big bill. All right, so that's going to create in the background. So we'll go back into our workspace and switch to these. That's better. we now should see it. It will then update and say it's creating. We're going to go in and create a Spark pool. So by default, we don't have a Spark pool. So we're just going to create one now. We're going to call this Spark Bits. Because I'm cheap, we're going to go with I can leave it medium. Yeah. 3 to 10 machines, that's fine. Obviously, I can wipe that up if I want to. On the auto scaling, I'll just leave it there. Auto scale is enabled. In fact, I wanted to click on, there we go. If you just click on create and review, it skips it right to the end, and then sometimes you don't see these. So this is the auto pausing. So obviously we want auto pausing. We'll shut down after 15 minutes. This is our version of Spark. We currently support Python, Scala, Java, and obviously .NET and Delta Lake. So just be aware that our Spark supports Delta Lake. And if I have any other packages, I can then put them in here and upload them. And so I'm just going to go through and create that. So while that creates, so we're back to our workspace. So okay, so it's starting to recognize and go through the process of restoring our SQL data warehouse. This will be updating in a minute. Firewall, so this is our firewall settings. This is just the kind of the public preview settings. These will change when it gets to GA. We have the ability to control manage identities. We can set up private endpoints, monitoring and metrics, etc. Just the normal standard stuff. Okay, so let's go into the Synapse Studio. So when we log in, you might get a little dialogue that takes you on a little tour. I've been through it. So this is our kind of home screen, and this just pushes us through the way that we would imagine a very, very simple workflow going. Ingest. This is me setting up a pipeline to get some source data, put it to a destination. If I want to then do some exploration of that, I then go in and then I look at my databases, or I can look at my file system where my files are, and then I can explore that. And then if I want to do some analysis using SQL or Spark, where then we're back to the ability, I then have the ability to create SQL scripts, notebooks, data flows, Spark definitions. I'm back here. I get the ability to visualize using Power BI. And that takes us here, straight in here, and then we can add in our Power BI straight away. But I'm not going to show it from here. I'm going to show it in how to add it in another way. But I would put the name of my Power BI workspace here. Discard. What I'm going to do is show you this manage bit. Let's open that up. So here we can do things like, and we could pause and we can resize, and we can then actually go and manage this SQL data warehouse. Because we don't have a cluster, we don't own a cluster on SQL-on-Demand, we just execute the script. It just finds a set of machines or machine to run it on, and then to give us a workload. And obviously Apache Spark, there's our definition ready to then be used. The key bit here, linked services. This is how I take it from what is quite a bare workspace and add extra services in, or we call them linked services. So we click on new. Right at the top there is the connect to Power BI, and we'll call this SQL bits Power BI. And I'm going to put into my workspace name, So I'm just going to find my workspace, which is Synapse WS. I'm going to give it the ability to edit it. It's fine. There's nothing under here, just advanced, just some JSON I could put. I'm going to create a link now from this workspace to Power BI here. I'm also going to create a link to a storage account, an extra storage account. I can create as many of these as I like. So let's call, I think it's storage. We're going to call it Data Lake Gen 2. Carry on. I'm going to call this my SQL Bits Demo area. I'm going to select from my subscription. I'm going to give it my that I want. Advanced, nothing else there that's interesting, and I'm going to hit create. So I'm not worried about interactive auditing. So what I've done, so these two bits I've added in, and we can now surface those up by seeing them on the side. So if I now go into data and I do refresh, we can now see that here is my storage account that I've added in. This was the original one, and then this is the storage account I've just added in. So now I can now go into things like, well, loading, and I can navigate through my storage, and I don't need an actual storage account. I don't need to have any other software installed. We're going to SQL Bits, and we'll see that I've got some folder structures with some stuff that I'm interested in. Also, in my workspace now, you can see I've got my databases. I hit refresh. There's our SQL pool. That probably won't be ready yet. We'll have to go and check back on that. Under develop, we can see Power BI. We can see my Power BI workspace. We can see my Power BI data set and my Power BI reports. So this is one I'd previously created, but if we zoom this out, we make this look a bit nicer. Take that in. Right, you can actually see there's a Power BI report there. And then I can click on bits. If I want to add some visualizations in, I can just click my filters, get some data. I can just click on here and I can just go, well, I want to see the sum of rate by my currency key, and there. And you can tell Power BI isn't my thing. But I can create my Power BI reports in here. Whether you can see here, I've got my Power BI report that I can flick back to my storage. So that's Power BI linked in. Now if I show you my storage account, we go back onto my data, onto linked. I can now show you some SQL-on-Demand. And so if we just find some files in here, we'll go into this folder, for example, and then we're into that day, and then I right click. I've got a number of options here. So new SQL script will enable SQL-on-Demand to select top 100 rows. It will give us the ability to create an external table on top of this file, and we can script a bulk load. We can also click New Notebook, which will then use our Spark cluster to view the data. We can also do a new data flow or a new data set from here. But let's do a new SQL script. So first of all, so this is just a normal view. We've got connect to SQL-on-Demand. Now we've only got one database there and it says master. Now, don't be confused by that. That is literally a master, but this isn't where we want to create objects. that I can now run that SQL request. So what this is saying is give me the top 100 rows from that file using this open row set. I can also say, well, give me everything from that folder. Because this is a Parquet file, we have the columns and we have some column information from it. So this is going through all the files that could be in that folder. So that's quite nice. And obviously we've got I always forget to show this, we've got the ability to do things like charting. So I can take that data and just immediately put a chart. And if I know what I'm doing or I've got time, I can then do things. I can then highlight these bits, I can choose categories, I can change the type of chart. Clearly that was the wrong kind of chart. Yeah, column looks alright, but line was the best one, wasn't it? I can also do things like, because this is SQL, I can go, well, let's say give me the let's have a look. Let's give me the count of records grouped by the country. And then I need to put here, like say group by country. And if I wanted to do things like aggregations, sums, okay, right, it's quite interesting. Right. I want to do all sorts of things with it, I can then do that. Pretty much most of the functionality that's supported in SQL is supported in SQL-on-Demand. If I go back to Workspace here, we can see there's only one database. Right. Now, I don't see my SQL-on-Demand here. You can see actually master there, but nothing here. And that's because master will never appear there. I have to create my own create database SQL bits on demand. I can now create that. Now, if I click here, now I've noticed that this doesn't always update as quickly as it should. So I need to open up a new script to be able to see that. So I need to go into my develop, add a SQL script, and we should be able to see that right, SQL-on-Demand. It's just a UI glitch. It'll be fixed by the time we sort of GA. So I can do things now that I have a database to work in. I have the ability for views. I can actually just turn that select statement into a view by create view SQL bits demo as course as I'll leave that in. Exactly. So, right. That's quite nice to see the error. So saying we can't create objects in master. So we need to use the other database. So what I'll do is I'll just take that query out there, pop it in here. The right database. There we go. Great. And there it is. And then I can do things that just do that. See, now it's automatically selected SQL bits on demand for me. That took 2 seconds. Now the reason we would want things like views and maybe external tables over the file system is so things like Power BI can come in and just select data directly from the views. So I can expose my file system to SQL, to Power BI really quickly and with very little effort. So that's very kind of quick starting on SQL-on-Demand. There's a couple of little bits that I do like to show people, just to show people that you can do a bit more. Just need to find there we go. Okay. So something I like to show people is this. Now it might seem like very small, me just selecting at that version, but I'm not just selecting the version. What I'm doing is I'm using dynamic SQL to do it. So I can write dynamic SQL to make this happen. So that just shows it's a lot more scope, and we could do things with parameters, which I kind of really like the idea, because we've got a lot more capability than we probably think we do have. So one of the next and probably the last thing that I'll show on SQL-on-Demand before we kind of show some of the other things is this. We've got a couple of keywords. If I create here, I'm just going to go back to this we had before. We've got a keyword called file path and file name. So if I do this, in fact, I'm probably just going to have to do that group by. I might just take that out, country out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to count all the records that are in any file that's in there and group by the file name. So we have the metadata. So this is something that we couldn't do previously in SQL Pools, or we can't do in SQL Pools, and we can't do in we haven't been able to do with Polybase and haven't been able to do with copy into, is we now have that metadata. We also have the ability to select just that one piece of information. So in fact, if I just say that, it will just pull out the file name path rather than the entire thing. But what if I want to do something kind of a bit fancier, and I said, well, I just want to pull out everything from a particular day or a particular month or a particular year, or I wanted to pull out everything from I wanted everything the first day in January for every year, and I wanted to pull in everything like that. I can now do things like that. So I can now parameterize this. And you can see this is more like a Hive metadata structure. But now this bit won't work. So this is like 20, so that would be 4. So that would be the first one there. This is basically going to group by the years. So in fact, let's do that and I'll just build it up. So this is going to give me from that entire folder structure. In fact, I can just flick to it now. So this entire folder structure, all the years, and all the number of records of files in those years. So it's just going to close you down because I'm not using you anymore. So you can see, and in fact, you can see that I was cheating because I was just creating this just for the demo. But you can see it's gone through each of the folder structures with all the folders and all the files. So I could say, well, let me give, and I can say, for example, where the year is equal to 2020. Now what this is doing behind the scenes is actually fetching the entire file system, the directory structure, then working out which folders it needs to look at to work out which then files it needs to look at to then work out what work it needs to do. So it's only pulling back things it needs to work on for that year. So it's not going to pull back the entire thing. But I can do more than this. I can say where this is that and where. Let's just take the entire thing. And let's say where the, what was number 2 here was a month. Well, let's just do in February. But if I'm doing a second, I can do that. So now it should be getting smaller because we're saying, right, only for that. And then we can say, well, now give me it for a particular day, which will be part 3. Oh, no, got that wrong. I'll leave that in. So what I can do as well is just find these. Then I can also take this out. So we can see from here, these are the number of years, these are the months, these are the days, and then the number of rows in each file. And in fact, to go through all of those only took 6 seconds. File systems, that's just a whirlwind tour of SQL-on-Demand. So that's something kind of I'm really quite excited about and are using quite a lot. So let's go and have a look at Spark now. If I pick up a particular file, and I'm going to do, that's very, very similar. So I can do, that's what I did before. I can choose new notebook. So now it gives me the query. There are other magic keywords to change the language, but let's run this. So this may take a minute or two because it has to initiate the Spark cluster. Okay, so we can see that that took 3.5 minutes. I think previously when I run it, it took about 2.5. And we can actually, if we rerun it, so I'll just rerun it straight away because most of that time is taken up by spinning up the cluster. There we go. All right, that took 3 seconds to do 3.5 seconds. So there's cluster, the Spark cluster to spin up, and then once it's up and running, then everything is super fast. So once again, I can look at the data, I can chart it out. Ooh, that's good, isn't it? I can also view the Spark UI. The reason why I did that is because it pops out into another window. So I can actually see the amount of jobs when the executors are added. You know, if you are into your Spark, kind of this, you know, this is more detail than I would normally be used to seeing. I can also go to the monitoring within the Synapse portal, so within the Synapse workspace. And we can see the graph should appear. And we can see what happened with it, with all the logs. And we can also click into the logs as well. And we can go back to Spark UI, which is what we've seen here. So if you imagine that I kind of was good at Spark, and then I went and I read some of this, I did some work, I then went, okay, I want to now operationalize that. If I could say the word, I'm reading in some data, I'm saving it, I'm doing some manipulation, but I want to run it on a schedule. I can do click to pipeline, choose new pipeline, and then immediately I've kicked off an orchestration pipeline. You know, it's created it, it's added the notebook, it's added the settings in. So here we can see that I've gone from file, just right clicking on it, creating a notebook, to then clicking on one button to creating a pipeline. So going from file to operationalizing it is extremely quick. And I can jump back between them. I can make some changes. I can then go and work on my Power BI reports if I want to, whilst other things are going on, all from the same user interface. So that I find kind of, this is where people really kind of love this. You can see even that didn't take too long either. So if you're into your Spark, obviously we can change the language up here. There's our Spark SQL, our .NET. I can go and I can configure the Spark session. I can stop it if I want. I quite like that. I quite like the fact you can just go very, very quickly, kick things up, get stuff going, and make it work. If I right click on, where was it? There we have properties. Okay. So that is that's very, very basic Spark loading, and then I can write, I can do all sorts of things. I'm not going to go into Spark and do things, but what I am going to do is hope that my MPP backup of my MPP database is ready. I'm going to show so if I want to go and view that data in there, I can do a SQL Script, and I can do the top 1000. This is just like Management Studio. So this is exactly what you expect. I can do the same functionality, the same work from there. You can see that I'm connecting to my SQL DW here on my database, and I can go into here and I can actually choose to manage pools, which takes me back onto this screen. I can pause it, I can scale it, I can go into the kind of the properties. If I go into there, I can look at all my settings. I can also dig into it from the workspace level. So if we go onto here, which is kind of the normal screen you would probably expect to see, that if you were going in and looking at a SQL pool now, these are the kind of screens you'd expect to see. I can also launch the studio from here. I can do the normal scaling, my normal actions. So let's go back to where we were. But I wanted to show you this neat little linking between the services. I can right click on my SQL pool, my provisioned SQL pool, and then I can choose new notebook. And then I can choose to load into a data frame. So I'm taking that table and loading it into a data frame, and I'm going to show it. So this is Spark talking to my MPP provision SQL data warehouse. Now this is going to spin up a new Spark session, so it will also take a few minutes. So while this is running, I'm going to show you something else. we're going to run this a couple of times so you can see how quick it is without the Spark engine starting up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my workspace. I'm going to connect to my SQL endpoint here. So what I'm going to have to do is switch windows. So I'm going to go, and this might take a second to do. All right, so let's connect over to Management Studio. Let's do connect, database engine. Okay, all right, that worked. All right, we'll leave that in. So this is my data warehouse. There we go. And these are my tables. So this is just my normal MPP that I've effectively back up and restored across. What I did want to show you was this query here. So let's make sure that we can execute. It will then make the right connection across. Now we've fixed all those little things. So all this is doing is showing me the queries that have been executing against this data warehouse. So we can see that that query, that Spark job, took 1 minute and 36 seconds to run, which is super cool. That wasn't too long. But you can see that it's using a slightly different keyword here, SQL Analytics, which is different from the previous one, which was load. So load was coming from the file system. SQL Analytics is coming from a SQL table or an MPP table. Now, what I wanted to do is show you what's happening behind the scenes. So if we now switch back to Management Studio, there we have, and I run that query again just to refresh it. We can see these things. Create the external table commands. I'll just pop that up here so you'll be able to see it better. So that's a file format, and this is an external table. So what this is saying is create an external table, which essentially is a file sitting in that location there, called that name, on that storage account, using that format, which is that query there. So select everything, which is what we executed. So what this is showing is behind the scenes, the Spark is actually using Polybase behind the scenes. So you'll find out that actually Databricks does a very similar job with its command, but this is quite neat. If you can use these sort of commands here if you're using Polybase or copy into when you're using ADF as well, and you'll see very, very similar statements being executed. So that's probably just a slightly deeper dive than you actually needed, but I just wanted to show you the integration. So when you click on here and you do new notebook to load data frame, that is pretty tight, and so it's very, very close between the two. So let's now click, just to double down, show you the monitoring again. We've got our SQL-on-Demand. Now we're not going to see anything in here unless something is actively running, but we've got our SQL DW, and this is showing very, very similar query and output that we were seeing on that previous screen in Management Studio. When I was looking at sysdm PDW exec requests, it's the same information that's coming through in here. And we also have the Apache Spark. So we can see those two clusters were running. So when I was running two sets of jobs, I was actually getting two clusters behind the scenes, and they've now cancelled and shut down. And we can click on them and get some more information if we want them. So these were the jobs. There we go. and we can look at the history for the server. There we go. Download the event log. I can dig into it. So we've got all that monitoring all built in, all ready to go. All right, so that is SQL Pools. I've shown you SQL-on-Demand. We've used Management Studio. We've used the Studio to go and open files. We've used some queries. We've done the file path to filter out folders. We've shown you Spark, shown you some of the MPP, but that's just the normal MPP engine. Some of the management, and a little bit of Power BI, a little bit of ADF. Let's now go back to the slides and do a quick recap. All right, so we've shown the data lake storage and the Explorer, and we can also show it also works from normal storage Explorer. So this is our SQL bit storage here. So same tools you can use, and they just work because that is just storage. The data integration, which was the ADF, which I've kind of skipped over, but it's showing you how to create a new runtime for a new notebook, a new job for a new notebook. The SQL engines, so the MPP engine, which we haven't really shown you, but that's kind of has been there for a while. And then there is the new SQL-on-Demand engine, so the query over data lake. There's the Spark engine, which is also new. We also did a tiny little bit of Spark, not very much. And then most of the time we spent in the Synapse Studio. And we've also looked at kind of the monitoring, some of the management, but we haven't really spent much time looking at security and the meta store. All right, well, that's, I think, all we've got time for today. So hopefully you've been asking questions of me too in the chat window, and I've been answering any specific questions you've got. And that's all, folks, and have a good rest of virtual SQL bits. All right, bye.